Alright guys, little disclaimer before this video starts. I am not talking about World War II Germany in this vid. This is all about before that. So don't go in the comments saying, "Oh my god, then Latvia likes no Germany. He's racist. We need to cancel him on Twitter." This is not about that. This is Germany before all that. And I wanted to make a history video on this because I'm German myself, and I don't know, I thought it'd be pretty cool. But yeah, little disclaimer out the way, and enjoy the video. This is the German Empire, one of Europe's most powerful and united empires. Truly a state of its time, and it has quite a lot of history behind it. During the early 1800s, there was tons of smaller German states scattered across the lands that make up Germany, the biggest of which were Prussia and Austria, who both wanted to unite the German people. They got this idea from the Napoleonic idea of nationalism, which spread like wildfire after Napoleon's empire collapsed. With this idea, Prussia used it to its advantage, and it rallied the German people behind it, to unite Germany into the empire it dreamed of. Austria hoped to do the same, but unfortunately for them, it backfired since they already had a massive empire, and the peoples of their empire used this idea to revolt and try to break free, leaving Austria to have to put down countless rebellions against their rule. Cut to the 1860s, and Prussia is very militarized, and plans to unite Germany from a series of wars. The first thing they wanted to do was push Denmark out of the North German region of Holstein, which they did in 1864 in the Second Schleswig War. And Austria tagged along too, hoping that they would get some land out of this. And they did. Holstein would be split into two, with Austria in the north and Prussia in the south. Austria was very displeased by this agreement, mostly because they had no access to Holstein. Prussia wasn't very happy about it either, and both sides claimed Holstein as theirs. After some tense relations, Austria and Prussia decided to go to war over this. This war divided the smaller states that supported Austria and Prussia, and there are hundreds of smaller states that I couldn't really write on this map, so I just wrote out some of the major ones. The ones that are colored red supported Austria, and the ones that are purple supported Prussia. This war only lasted 2 months and ended in Prussian victory. After the war was won, Prussia united into the North German Confederation, which didn't end the smaller states' existences, but it did incorporate them into a single entity. And they also changed their flag to the iconic black, white, and red flag, which I think looks really cool. Austria after this war was devastated, and in their defeat they realized that they weren't going to be able to unite Germany under their rule, and a year later they formed into Austria-Hungary. With Austria out of the picture, there was only one state left preventing German unification, and that was France. France and Germany were never really on good terms, and both states hated each other. The North German Confederation knew that if they wanted to unite their vision of Germany, they would have to defeat France in a war. And they would get their opportunity in the year 1870. Spain had been left without a ruler for about 2 years now, and North Germany thought it would be pretty cool if they put a member of their royal family in charge of Spain. France hated this, mostly because they didn't want someone from a German royal family in charge of Spain. This would basically corner France, so they sent a telegram to North German Prime Minister at the time, Otto von Bismarck, about the whole ordeal. Bismarck edited the telegram and made it look like they rudely snubbed the French off. France was outraged by this, and they decided that a good way to get Germany back from this was to declare war on them. And since they were the ones to declare war on Germany, this made it look like Germany was the victim, and this would prevent other powers from joining the war against Germany. This war showed just about everything the Prussian army was capable of. It absolutely demolished the French army, it took Paris, and it left France in ruin. This victory was the final victory needed to unite Germany, and on January 18th, 1871, the German Empire united in the city of Versailles, with Wilhelm I as its Kaiser. After the German Empire formed, its economy and industry began to rise rapidly, and the empire became very prosperous, and also a global center of science and art. It also began doing what other European states were doing at the time, and that was colonizing. They joined in the colonial race pretty late, but they did make off with some gains, shown here. Nearing the end of the 1800s, there were some leadership changes within the empire. Kaiser Wilhelm I, died in 1888. The new Kaiser, Frederick, I think that's how you say that, the third, unfortunately died after just 90 days of becoming emperor, leaving the throne to Wilhelm II, who was now in charge of the empire. The first years of his reign were pretty good, besides Bismarck disagreeing with many of his policies and his leadership, and eventually resigning from his role as prime minister. Besides that, he got the empire some colonies and hosted a meeting in Berlin to decide how to divide Africa between the European colonies, which were in Africa at the time. He also began greatly expanding Germany's navy, which worsened relations with the British, and his foreign policy was also very aggressive, which made relations with other European states very tense. But his leadership did manage to form an alliance with several nations, and this was known as the Central Powers, with Austria-Hungary and Italy, and this would unfortunately lead to Germany's involvement in the next big war. On June 29, 1914, a Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip would assassinate Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. I hope I said that right. This pissed off Austria-Hungary, who would then go to war with Serbia over the whole ordeal. Germany, who had supported Austria-Hungary, supported them, and eventually all of Europe was at war. I'm not going too far in depth on how World War I started, because that could honestly be its own video, but all you really need to know is that Germany, along with Austria-Hungary, were now at war with France, Russia, and Serbia. And unfortunately, Italy would not join the war on the side of Germany, claiming that they had only joined the war for defensive reasons. Besides this, Germany had a plan, and their master strategy was to go around all of France's defenses on the German border, and instead go through Belgium to defeat France. And then with those troops freed up, they would then go east to defeat Russia, and Austria-Hungary would defeat Serbia. Pretty decent plan, but the only problem was that Belgium was neutral, and Britain wanted to maintain Belgium's neutrality, which meant if Germany attacked Belgium, it would mean war with Britain. After the German march through Belgium, their arrival in France was of course greeted with gunfire. They had some initial success, but after the First Battle of the Marne, the Germans were forced to retreat and dug into defensive positions. The Allied forces were exhausted after the battle and also dug in, leading to trench warfare on the Western Front. The Eastern Front was a whole different story. The Russians were able to get their forces ready much faster than the Germans expected. They launched an attack into East Prussia, but unfortunately for Russia, Germany was able to send some troops back to the Western Front to counter the Russian attack. And counter it they did. They absolutely destroyed the Russian attack at the Battle of Tannenberg, and after this, Germany advanced into Russia's holdings in Poland. By 1915, a lot was happening. In the Balkans, Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire had joined the war on the Central Powers, and they were now fighting the Entente, which were the allies of World War I. The Entente's new ally was Italy, who joined because of some claims they had on Austria-Hungary's land. With a combined attack from Germany and Austria-Hungary and Bulgaria, Serbia fell in 1915, and after this, Germany would begin advancing deeper into Russia. By 1917, the German Empire would then collapse the Russian Empire, with military advancement and jump-starting the communist uprisings that would eventually become the USSR. Before they collapsed, Romania, hoping to save Russia in the war, joined the side of the Entente and immediately got destroyed. After Russia was defeated, the German Empire would force what was left of Russia to sign the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, I hope I said that right, which granted Germany a huge amount of land in the east. But in the west, the front was not doing too well. The Germans lost the Battle of Verdun, and also America joined the war against Germany. Before they did, though, Germany sent what was known as the Zimmermann telegram to Mexico, which was an attempt to get them to attack America. This failed after the British intercepted the message and showed it to America. After the American entry in the war, Germany knew that they needed to end this war quickly, before American troops arrived in France. If they didn't, they would be overwhelmed. The Germans launched a series of last-ditch attacks against the Allies, which did pretty alright. They pushed the Allies back to the Marne River where they were at the start of the war. This was known as the Second Battle of the Marne, and it was the last major German offensive of the war. The battle went really badly for the Germans. The Allies had tanks and more troops and more morale since America's entry, and it was a crushing defeat for the German Empire. And after this battle, they would get pushed out of France and back into Belgium. This, combined with Greece's entry into the war and the Balkan front collapsing, along with Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire, Germany was forced to surrender. After the German surrender in 1918, things quickly went into chaos. Kaiser Wilhelm advocated the throne and the empire was left without a leader, not to mention the communist revolts that rose up in the country after the empire's defeat. Also, Poland invaded and occupied several areas of the empire's eastern territories, and after their defeat, the German Empire was officially dissolved after the Treaty of Versailles, ending the empire after only 47 years, and in its place would be known as the Weimar Republic, which would be very, very weak and unprepared for Germany's future, which was going to be very, very dark.